Hi, my name is Suzanne Keys, and I want to welcome you to the micro learning series on functional medicine A to Zinc. And today we're going to start talking about the introduction to functional medicine. Functional medicine gives us an understanding of what is predisposing you to the conditions that you end up with later in life. And so it's getting to the root cause instead of treating the symptoms. Functional medicine educates you to where you can then use that education to educate the patient and showing them what the effects of all of those things are doing and how it's culminating into manifestations of a chronic disease or symptoms of a chronic disease. When I explain it to patients, I tell them that I want to take what you have and find out why you have it. I started by just wanting to know why everybody was coming to my counter with the same symptoms, taking the same medications, and no one was getting better. And so I had a drive and a passion to find out why, if what we were doing is working, then why is chronic disease on the rise? And that was the basis for my questions thereafter of asking why. Patients are tired of taking medications that are not getting them better. A lot of my patient population are either have the fear that they're going to be put on a medication that they've heard bad things about, or that they're on medications that they know aren't helping them. And so they're looking for it. They're looking for somebody that will align themselves with them and help direct them to a better life, feeling better, not being exhausted, enjoying their kids. Functional medicine kind of gives you an education in all of the factors that can affect those things. A mantra that functional medicine uses a lot is that your genes load the gun, but your environment pulls the trigger. And so if we can mitigate those symptoms by knowing the triggers and then removing them, and knowing the cofactors that support pathways, we can actually help either reverse or arrest autoimmune diseases. Because I honestly, fervently believe that everything that we put in our mouth is triggering something or turning a gene on or off. There's not a pill for what the lack of sleep does. There's not a pill for the effects of chronic stress. There's not a pill for sluggish liver detoxification. I feel like pharmacists are the best positioned for this because we're the most accessible healthcare member on the team. We see the patients on a weekly or monthly basis. Patients only see their doctors once every 3 months, 6 months, a year. And they're limited to about 7.5 minutes to 15 minutes in that office. And there's not a lot that you can glean from a patient on their history in that time frame. And so functional medicine gives the framework to build a patient story and develop protocols and specific guides for them. As patients are historically used to coming to a pharmacist's counter and just asking questions, it positions us in a great place to be able to start asking why. Somebody who has a passionate curiosity. Absolutely. Without that, I think that my road might have taken a different turn. It could have easily taken a different turn. But I had just a passionate curiosity to keep going, why? I found that there are not many resources directed specifically to pharmacists in functional medicine. For the first 1.5 years of my journey into this advanced education, I did a lot of the research and pulling together the pieces on my own. And it was only after about 15, 18 months, I wanted to be a part of that certification process. So for me personally, I chose to go down that pathway. That does not mean that every person that wants to bring functional medicine into their practice, they need to be certified. I felt, because it had been so many years since I was in school that I needed a foundation of immunology. I needed to go back and revisit mitochondrial and ATP and the methylation process because those aren't things that we typically talk about in traditional pharmacy. So for me, I needed those courses to feel confident that I could see the big picture and then focus in on the small picture and then relay that to a patient. I just kept asking why. Why does everybody have Hashimoto's? Why is every 30 to 40-year-old female coming in and having symptoms of menopause? Why is most of my practice is around women, but why are all the women coming in saying, I've done everything and I can't lose weight? And then I would just pull bits of information from them, put it together, and when I found the common denominators, it was like a light bulb went off, and there were simple remedies. They were simple remedies. So if what we were doing was working, there would not be a need for this. I see a lot of autoimmune. I see a lot of insulin resistance. We see a lot of manifestations from leaky gut or intestinal permeability. There's an entire population of people that want to get off of their PPIs and either don't know how or don't know what's causing it, or they do it the wrong way, which causes them to have rebound symptoms. One of them at the top of the list is drug-induced nutrient depletions because we're already trained in that. We already know the basics of drug-induced nutrient depletions, and that is something that some people may argue that it's not functional medicine based, but it really is, because before there were drugs that were inducing these depletions, we had pathways that were supported by the cofactors coming from our food. And if that's the source of disruption, then being a trigger, then let's fix it. So I think that drug-induced nutrient depletion is, number one, the easiest thing to start, and it's familiar. We already counsel patients on the obvious. If you take statins, you need to take a CoQ10, but it's digging a little bit deeper than that. When I see a patient, the very first thing when they start talking about their symptoms is I start thinking about the pathway that's being affected. And then I'll ask them questions about sleep or their eating habits. And then I'll know that based on the things that they're telling me, their habits, that pathway is being disrupted. Then I'll ask them about their drugs that they're taking for their symptoms. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that pathway is really being disrupted. So I think that between drug-induced nutrient depletions and literally by finding the pathway and just picking one, I think a pharmacist with the knowledge that they have coming out of school could mitigate a patient's outcome. If a pharmacist wanted to just look at the serotonin pathway, where you take tryptophan that goes into 5-HTP, that goes into serotonin, that turns into melatonin, how many patients do we know are on SSRIs? How many patients are still either depressed or they're not sleeping? If you just take one pathway and go, if you don't have enough B6, that pathway's not going to work. You can't turn 5-HTP into serotonin. You can't turn serotonin into melatonin. No wonder you're not sleeping. You've got patients that are on SSRIs that have heavy metal fluoride backbones and bromide backbones, that in some people that aren't detoxing well, that bromide is going to build up and then it creates symptoms. I'm saying this based on a personal patient experience that I had. And she was on citalopram, hydrobromide. And her bromide level when we tested it was, I think the normal is up to 4,000 and hers was 28,000. And she had every symptom of high bromide that nobody over 3 years has ever diagnosed. So they kept adding seizure medication to her. She had tremors and everything. You could go to the dopamine, the excitatory pathway, and look at how you need cortisol to turn norepinephrine into epinephrine. How many patients have weight issues? They can't lose weight. Well, epinephrine is absolutely required for fat lipolysis. Oh man, if they don't have enough cortisol because they're under chronic stress, that cortisol is what turns norepi into epi. So you could help them just by knowing that pathway. The thyroid pathway. How many patients come in and say, no, it's not my thyroid, even though my hair is falling out, my nails are brittle, I'm cold, I'm constipated, I'm depressed, and I can't lose weight. It's not my thyroid because my doctor tested my TSH. Well, there's an entire diagram there that I've built to show practitioners and patients that there's at least 22 areas that if you don't have the right cofactors, nothing in that whole pathway is going to work. Your TSH may still be normal, but nothing else is. I think that functional medicine gives so many avenues for a different niche. Pharmacists are with the knowledge that you get from a functional medicine education. You could pick nutrition and become a food expert and help patients in that respect. You could study pharmacogenomics. These are things that are outside of what we're normally taught in school and what is normally expected from the patients or from the practitioner, but it sets you apart, it sets you aside. So there's so many avenues within that functional medicine, there's so many things within that umbrella that a pharmacist could go through and pick. And I really encourage pharmacists to find their passion, find the thing that most intrigues them.